Բարև ձեզ հարգելի բարեկամներ, Սփյուռքի ձայնը հեռուստահանդեսը դարձյալ ձեզ հետ է։ Այսօրվա մեր հաղորդումը ուզում եմ սկսել ձեզ ներկայացնելով մի բացառիկ հարցազրույց։ Օսմանյան կայսրության տարիներին Թուրքիայում Ամերիկայի Միացյալ Նահանգների դեսպան Հենրի Մորգենթաուի թոռան Ռոբերտ Մորգենթաուի հետ, ինչպես նաև նովելիստ Մարգարիտ Ajemian Ahnert-ի հետ։
Bob Morgenthau continues the heritage of his family, because family was a critical part of Bob's view towards life.
He is the product of his family. He is the product of that grandfather and that father, who are these world citizens.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
We were firing on designated targets, and somebody yelled, "Hey, the flag's going up on Suribachi."
Secretary of the Treasury Morgenthau with General
I know his deep pride of his father, who is responsible for having saved tens of thousands of Jews.
He was impassioned. He felt it the way his father felt for the Armenians.
The Turks began to try to Turkify Turkey and to destroy the Armenians. Genocide, I guess, sort of took on its own momentum.
He was just outraged by the massacre, reporting back to the United States about what the Turks did to the Armenians.
His being an ambassador in Istanbul during these critical years was very crucial and very important for us. And if we had maybe a couple of more Morgenthaus in Washington, we would have really experienced another result.
Thank you so much for both of you for coming on our show. It's an honor and privilege to have you both in this important time when we are commemorating 100th anniversary of Armenian Genocide. Mr. Morgenthau, first allow me to say that I'm honored to have this conversation.
Well, I'm honored to be on this program. It's important.
It is important indeed. With a Museum of Jewish Heritage in a few days is going to take an important event commemorating 100th anniversary of Armenian Genocide that you will be hosting. Could you please tell us in a few words what is this event about?
Well, it's about the recognition of what happened 100 years ago, which has been consistently denied by the Turkish government. We think it's important for the world to understand that that was the first genocide of the 20th century. If there had been broader recognition of that, maybe some of these other genocides would not have occurred. But that's the reason. I mean, the Armenians are an ancient people, a great people, and we don't want to see what was done to the Armenian people ignored by the world. It's amazing the way Armenia has recovered from that genocide. But anybody who read the 40 Days of Musadah by Franz Werfel, or the book by my friend here,
which we will come to soon.
Yes. Margaret Ahnert, I mean, can understand, I mean, the brutality of the Turks at that time.
How and when were you introduced to Armenian culture, Armenian nation, and subsequently the issue of Armenian genocide?
Well, because my family was in Washington when I was at school and college, I used to stay with my grandfather. And so it was through him that I learned about what happened. And the great disappointment of his life was that he did not live to see an independent Armenia. That was his goal.
Of course, your grandfather was the U.S. ambassador to Ottoman Turkey.
Right.
he was perhaps one of the most important eyewitnesses of Armenian genocide, which you put it in a book, of course. At a time, he appealed to US government to intervene and to save the people, of the innocent lives of these people. You also, 2 generations later, appealed to US government and President Obama to do something, particularly to recognize Armenian genocide that has not happened yet. Why do you think US government in a period of 100 years continues to avoid this issue?
Well, I think early on it may have been simple inertia, but in the more recent past it's because of the strong opposition of the Turkish government. And I've talked to some, I thought, intelligent Turks and said, you know, isn't it time that your government recognizes what happened? And they look at me and say, isn't it time that the Armenians recognize that they were disloyal? And I said, well, I don't think they were disloyal, but even if they were, that doesn't justify killing all the women and children.
Exactly. Over 1 million, 1.5 million.
1.5 million, yeah.
Could you tell me what kind of man your grandfather was?
Well, you know, he came to this country in 1866, 10 years old, not speaking a word of English. He taught himself English. He got into City College 6 years later, the class of 1875, had to drop out because his father said, you got to help support the family. Went to work in a law office, got into Columbia Law School without ever having more than 1 year of college, graduated at age 20, had to wait a year to be admitted to the bar, worked his way through law school by teaching night school to immigrants. At that time we had night high schools for immigrants all over the city. Now we have just one. We treated immigrants a lot better then than we do now, and that's one reason why I'm particularly interested in seeing that immigrants get a fair shake. But he was a serious man, a hard worker, but he also had his light moments. He had a good sense of humor.
While I was listening, you describing your grandfather, among many qualities that you just mentioned, undoubtedly he had an extremely strong sense of justice.
He did.
Because he ultimately resigned from his post in protest for what has happened. And after that, he worked very hard to establish Nearest Foundation. How does that sense of justice has influenced your life?
Well, I think broader than that, sense of public service.
Exactly.
I remember, you know, him saying to me, I had to wait until I was 55 to enter public service. You don't have that excuse. You should do it right away, which I took to heart. But he, I mean, he was less than 50 years after he arrived in this country. He was United States Ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, and he took his position very seriously. He was very proud of being an American. But because he was a new American, I think he was more sensitive to injustices for minorities than a lot of other people were. I mean, there was nothing, I mean, there was no political motive. I mean, he just felt very strongly, this is a terrible thing that's going on. It's got to be exposed.
There has been an outpouring support worldwide, from Pope to Germany, recognizing Armenian genocide, which I think is quite significant because Germany was allies with Turkey during World War I. Many other countries. Do you think that we moved the needle closer to getting worldwide recognition in light of everything that happened in the past few weeks?
I think so. I think so. And I think it's, if we keep the pressure on, I think it's just a a matter of time before the Turkish government has to acknowledge what happened.
Are you optimistic?
I'm an optimist by nature, and it's important to keep the pressure on. You can't take the pressure off, but I think if we keep it on, I think they will eventually recognize, that they made a tragic and huge mistake. Killed 1.5 million Armenians. I mean, that's something that everybody's got to recognize, including the Turkish government.
I want to speak a little bit about current political events because I would like to take this opportunity and hear your opinion. You spoke about immigrants and the immigrants' rights. There's been a lot of move to recognize the children of immigrants that came here to fault of not their own. It seemed like there was a lot of progress in allowing immigrants that are here to get a sort of a legal status, but it has stalled. It has stalled in Congress, it has stalled in Senate. Are you optimistic that immigration reform will happen?
Let me say, I wish I were. I mean, the irony of all this is that the people who are fighting immigration are immigrants themselves, or children of immigrants. I mean, I've had this argument with a number of opponents, and I've said, your family were immigrants. And they say, yeah, but they came here illegally. They came here illegally. These people didn't. I think that as I follow what's going on in the newspapers, I think we're making some progress, but it's tough. But I mean, if the United States is going to be the home of the brave and the land of the free, we got to open the door for immigrants.
It is quite inspiring to speak with you. For me personally, this will stay with me perhaps for the rest of my life.
Well, thank you.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for everything you've done for our nation, for our people, for the tireless fight that you put up for this cause of justice. It's truly an honor speaking with you, sir. Thank you.
Well, it's been easy because you're great. The Armenians are a great people and an ancient people, and it's important that we keep Armenia alive and strong.
I want to ask you one last question. Have you traveled to Armenia recently?
No.
Have you traveled to Armenia at all?
No.
So perhaps this would be the time to visit. I'm sure you're going to be having a hero's welcome.
Well, I was invited to come over there for the ceremonies this year, but at 95, 12-hour flight is maybe a bridge too far. So my oldest son went over and represented me there.
95 years old young. Thank you so much, sir.
All right.
The knock at the door. Where are we at with the book? We spoke a few years ago where you were actively promoting the book. We spoke at length about the content of the book, which is, of course, the memoirs of your mother, a survivor of Armenian Genocide. Here we are, 100th anniversary of Armenian Genocide, a rather incredible and perhaps a green landmark. Where we are with the book?
I've been on an 8-year book tour, which is probably, I don't know if it's a record or not, but it's awfully long. And I'm very happy about all of the places I've been to. I started in 2007, and I spoke at Harvard University, and when I asked how many people knew about the Armenian Genocide, 2 or 3 hands in an audience of 100 went up. And I went back 4 years later to Harvard, and 40 to 50 hands went up. I can't take all credit for that, but I know more people know about it today than did 10 years ago. I'm sad that my government hasn't recognized something that is proven to so many other countries. But I have hope. I just hope I see it. I live to see it. I know it will happen, as Bob said. It will happen. I just hope it's in time for both of us.
Tell me a little bit about about the philanthropical work that you do, particularly in Armenia.
This is the thing I'm most proud of. I've started a project in Armenia for young Armenian girls. Not boys, sorry boys, not in on this. But I have a 2-year scholarship with stipend and room and board for girls only. And the only stipulation at the end of the 2 years and their diploma, they must work in the country for 1 year, helping not only the girls themselves, but the country. So it was a kind of a double header for me. I'm so proud of that.
Yeah.
Even, I'm sorry kids, my own children, this is such a heart-wrenching thing for me.
To conclude this conversation, once again, thank you both. And Mr. Morgenthau, I want to take this opportunity and ask you if you can give one message to our audience, to our Armenian audience, what that would be.
Never forget what happened. Keep that in the public eye, both among Armenians and the world at large. You don't want to be speaking only to yourself. You've got to involve the public at large and make sure that people understand that 1.5 million Armenians were brutally killed without cause or provocation, and it should never happen again. And the important thing is keep it in the public domain. Make sure that everybody understands. Talk about it. Write about it. Read books like Margaret Ahnert's book, my great book, 40 Days of Musadam. Got to keep reminding people until the chapter is closed by Turkey admitting that it was a genocide, and by the United States through its president speaking out saying, and through the Congress, it was a genocide. That has to be done.